Roseanne Barr's attack on Jasmine Crockett reveals underlying racial and political biases that continue to shape public discourse in America. The clash between Barr and Crockett did not happen in a vacuum. It unfolded in a politically charged environment where race, gender, and ideology intersect in complex ways. Barr, a figure known for her controversial opinions and polarizing statements, directed a pointed critique at Crockett, a Black Congresswoman with a reputation for being outspoken and unafraid to confront her critics. While Barr's comments were framed as a personal attack on Crockett's character and political positions, the language, tone, and context of the attack revealed deeper, systemic prejudices that are often directed at women of color in public office. These biases are not always explicit, but they manifest in the selective scrutiny, disproportionate criticism, and the readiness with which certain individuals are painted as aggressive, unqualified, or divisive simply for expressing their views or standing their ground. The content of Barr's attack on Crockett included tropes and dog whistles that have historically been used to diminish Black women in positions of power. The labeling of Crockett as combative or unprofessional mirrors centuries-old stereotypes that attempt to delegitimize assertiveness when it comes from women of color. Such portrayals serve to silence or marginalize voices that challenge the status quo, particularly when those voices speak truth to power. By targeting Crockett with this kind of rhetoric, Barr tapped into a long-standing narrative that seeks to exclude Black women from the realm of respectability and leadership, unless they conform to predetermined, often restrictive, molds. This is not merely a matter of personal disagreement. It reflects a broader societal pattern in which critiques of behavior or speech are unevenly applied depending on the race and gender of the individual involved. The timing and platform of Barr's attack also play a critical role in revealing these underlying biases. In an era where social media amplifies both support and criticism at lightning speed, Barr's statements quickly garnered attention not only for their content, but for what they exposed about her own worldview. The speed with which her attack turned into a reflection of her own contradictions demonstrated how racial and political biases operate in public discourse. Rather than inviting a meaningful debate or presenting a substantive critique, the attack relied on insinuation and innuendo, signaling to a certain audience that Crockett's very presence and voice in politics was somehow objectionable. This is a tactic often employed when individuals lack solid arguments but seek to undermine credibility through cultural signaling and character assassination. The broader political landscape further contextualizes Barr's comments. Crockett, like many progressive women of color in Congress, represents a demographic and ideological shift in American politics that is met with both enthusiasm and resistance. Her presence challenges traditional power structures and exposes the discomfort that some individuals feel when confronted with leaders who do not fit the historical norm. Barr's reaction can be seen as part of this broader backlash, one that is not just about policy differences, but about the fear of changing social dynamics. The attack, then, becomes a proxy for expressing discomfort with the rise of empowered, vocal, and unapologetic Black women in leadership roles. It is within this context that Barr's words take on deeper significance, revealing not only her personal prejudices, but the structural inequalities that still permeate American political and cultural life. Moreover, the nature of the discourse around this incident highlights how media and public platforms contribute to the reinforcement of such biases. The coverage and commentary that followed Barr's attack often focused on the drama and spectacle rather than interrogating the deeper racial and gendered implications of her words. This selective framing allows biased narratives to persist unchallenged, giving space to voices that perpetuate harmful stereotypes while sidelining those who call them out. The lack of accountability in such instances reinforces a double standard in which certain individuals are allowed to express vitriol or disrespect with impunity, while others are held to stricter standards of decorum and civility. The effect is not just reputational damage to individuals like Crockett, but a chilling effect on others who might fear similar treatment for speaking out or standing firm in their convictions. Barr's own history of racially insensitive remarks adds yet another layer to the incident. Her past behavior makes it difficult to view her attack on Crocket as an isolated event, and instead positions it within a pattern of inflammatory commentary that often targets marginalized communities. This continuity raises questions about the sincerity of her criticisms and whether they are motivated by genuine political concern or by a deeper disdain for figures who represent change and challenge existing hierarchies. The recurrence of racially charged language and imagery in her past further erodes the legitimacy of her present-day critiques, suggesting that the attack on Crocket may have been less about political disagreement and more about a reflexive reaction to a powerful black woman exercising her voice. In analyzing Barr's attack through this lens, it becomes evident that such incidents are not just personal disputes, but reflect larger societal tensions. They reveal the fault lines of race, gender, and ideology that continue to divide and define public engagement. When prominent figures use their platforms to single out individuals like Jasmine Crockett with loaded language and veiled insults, they are not merely engaging in political sparring. They are contributing to a climate of hostility that disproportionately affects women of color. The cumulative effect of such attacks is not only to delegitimize the individuals targeted, but to signal to wider audiences that these individuals do not belong or are inherently problematic. This signaling reinforces exclusionary norms and discourages participation from those who already face systemic barriers to entry in politics and public life. Barr's controversial past tweets resurface, undermining her credibility and exposing hypocrisy in the midst of her recent attack on Jasmine Crockett. When Roseanne Barr chose to publicly criticize Crocket, the backlash was swift, not just because of the content of her comments, but because many quickly recalled Barr's long and well-documented history of inflammatory statements on social media. These resurfaced tweets, which included racist, Islamophobic, and conspiratorial remarks, served as a stark reminder of Barr's own lapses in judgment and raised questions about her authority to judge or critique anyone's character or professionalism. Rather than presenting herself as a credible voice engaging in meaningful political dialogue, Barr inadvertently reminded the public of her most controversial moments, bringing her own behavior under renewed scrutiny. The hypocrisy in Barr's attack became more apparent when juxtaposed with the tone and substance of her past social media presence. In one infamous instance, Barr made a racially offensive comparison involving former Obama advisor Valerie Jarrett, which led to the cancellation of her ABC show and a massive public fallout. Despite apologizing for that incident, Barr's history of making derogatory comments across racial, religious, and political lines has continued to shadow her reputation. When she aimed similar rhetorical weapons at Jasmine Crockett, many critics pointed out the irony of someone with such a toxic online footprint accusing another public figure of poor conduct or unprofessionalism. The hypocrisy was not merely incidental. It was central to the way audiences interpreted her remarks. In trying to portray herself as a watchdog of political integrity or social norms, Barr reactivated memories of moments when she had grossly violated those very principles. Public memory plays a significant role in shaping reactions to current events, and in Barr's case, it became impossible to separate her current words from her past actions. The internet never forgets, and in the case of high-profile figures like Barr, every controversial tweet and post remains archived and ready to be re-examined whenever a new controversy emerges. As her attack on Crocket gained traction, social media users quickly began sharing screenshots of her past remarks, often alongside her current statements to highlight the glaring contradiction. This trend turned what Barr may have intended as a critique of someone else into an accidental self-exposure. What she may have hoped would shift attention toward Crockett's character instead reignited debates about Barr's own credibility and moral compass. The media also played a role in amplifying this dynamic, with several outlets revisiting Barr's tweet history to provide context for her attack. These retrospectives didn't just list old tweets. They dissected them, analyzed patterns, and drew connections between past controversies and present behavior. Many commentators argued that Barr's tendency to lash out at progressive women, especially women of color, reveals a deeper, more consistent worldview than she might openly admit. Her critics questioned whether her attacks stem from genuine political disagreements or a habitual inclination to demean those who challenge conservative or traditionalist narratives. This framing of Barr as someone who repeatedly engages in targeted, divisive attacks rather than reasoned critique reinforced the sense that her credibility is compromised not just by a few bad tweets, but by a broader pattern of conduct. Another layer of hypocrisy in the incident lies in the standards Barr seemed to invoke when attacking Crocket. Implicit in her comments was the idea that Crocket, as a public official, should uphold certain standards of decorum or behavior. Yet Barr herself, though not an elected figure, has operated in the public eye for decades and is well aware of the power and reach of her work. If one is to hold public figures accountable for the impact of their statements, then Barr must also be accountable for her own extensive record of controversial and offensive. The selective enforcement of such standards, criticizing others for supposed breaches while ignoring or downplaying one's own, only deepens perceptions of hypocrisy and weakens the legitimacy of the critique. Furthermore, Barr's recent attack could have been an opportunity for her to demonstrate personal growth or a shift in tone, but instead it seemed to reaffirm the same combative and inflammatory style that has defined much of her public commentary. For someone who faced serious consequences for past tweets, including losing a major television show and widespread condemnation, one might expect a more reflective or cautious approach when weighing in on sensitive political issues. Instead, the tone of her remarks suggested that she had learned little from past controversies and may even have embraced the role of provocateur as part of her public identity. This stubborn attachment to outrage and offense as a mode of expression continues to alienate those who once viewed her as a trailblazing entertainer and further entrenches her reputation as a divisive figure. That fear is often masked as concern about civility or decorum, but it ultimately reveals discomfort with equity, justice, and the empowerment of those who have long been excluded. The uneven treatment Crocket received after standing up for herself is not an isolated event, but part of a recurring pattern that demands greater awareness, critical thinking, and systemic change in how we engage with and evaluate public figures.